Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We've got a black screen here. There's a reason for that. This is kind of an impromptu stream. I got a debate offline if I'm going to put this up on YouTube. We're back from, I guess not back from, technically we are. Back from the planetary qualifiers yesterday in New Jersey. I got to be honest, I'm always happy anytime I get to go back to New Jersey. And no, that's not sarcastic. I love being in New Jersey. I literally feel better every time the GPS says, "Welcome to New Jersey." And I was very happy to be able to attend. I was not very happy with my performance whatsoever. It literally woke me up today with how angry I was at my own performance. What are you going to do? It's a little late now. Needed to think about that during the day. I'll get into it as we go through the different events. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about my initial thoughts on the planetary qualifiers, some of the results from around the world, and the other ones, what we're looking forward to next week, and including today. I think some of them are actively being played literally right this second in other parts of the world, or other parts of the country for that matter. US we're talking about. And I also want to spend some time talking about the Chicken Littling that's already happening. So let's jump into it. Almost hit the wrong button. Now, this is from a resource that is, well, it's right up there. Star Wars Unlimited Competitive Hub. This is not, I don't think this is the same site that, there was a site and I lost the link and it's really bothering me now because I was trying to find it before I went live. And there was a link, a website that was being hosted that was compiling a ton of different content creators, including myself. And it was awesome. Like, it was really cool to have a one-stop shop place to go so that you could find stuff. And especially for new people, be like, oh, rather than just Googling Star Wars Unlimited stuff, where do I go? Well, this is not the site, like I said, but they also have something similar. I'm very curious how you get on this list. Based on the names, it's probably partially based on size. These are known and very, very influential content creators, we'll put it that way. Definitely names that you're going to recognize all across the board. But speaking of content creators, like I said, I was at the New Jersey event at Red Seal Gaming. First of all, shout out to Red Seal Gaming. The site was incredible. This is the first time I've been there, and I made it a point to go talk to the owner that was there. So shout out to Dan. And I said, I wish this place was around when I was growing up in Jersey and I could have gone there to play, because I would have been there every week. And I've actually considered, is there a way for me to swing driving out there? There really isn't logistically. It's just too damn far for me to drive on a regular basis, like in the middle of the week sort of thing. But place was awesome. And I also will make this point. My wife judges game stores every time we go to places. Everybody does. You go in, you're like, do I like this place? Do I not like this place? Even if it's out of town, like, would I come back here? And the biggest thing for her, do they have clean bathrooms? And I will say there were two bathrooms, and they were clean. They were very clean. The whole place was clean. It was well lit. And that sounds weird to say because, oh, it's a gaming store. Shouldn't the first question be, do they support gamers? Do they have stock? Do they do this? But I've been to a lot of gaming stores. I've been doing this for over 30 years now. Yeah, it's over 30 years now, officially, I think, at this point. And I've seen a lot of good ones. I've seen a lot of terrible ones, even in recent history. And Red Seal Gaming was a very nice store. Staff was great. Location was pretty cool. The shop setup was great. Can't say enough, but we'll make that be enough. Secondly, shout out to everybody that attended. Definitely met a lot of cool people for the first time. Definitely put faces to names or names to faces, or even if I've seen the faces because YouTube videos, at least got to shake the hand of a number of people. The KTOD crew was there. Woo was there. Shout out to McClunky Gaming. My man is jacked. You can't tell from the Discord picture that that's the big joke is Titan he's a big dude. He's a big dude. But he was really cool. There were a number of other teams that were there, and shout out to everybody, because I could be listing these off for a while, and I'm sure I'll forget someone, and it's definitely not intended to be a slight. It's more just there was a lot of people. We had great representation from across both the content creator sphere as well as the competitive player sphere. A lot of faces that I recognized from big events, either winning them, seeing their pictures taken, or from videos or interviews, whatever. Definitely really awesome. And everybody who didn't fall into that category was also really cool. Sitting down, playing with people, didn't have any problems throughout the day, didn't hear about any problems throughout the day. You get 100 people in a room, and just by law of averages, like, you're probably going to get someone who's going to cause a ruckus, we'll say. And that didn't happen. So just saying, awesome time. Definitely a lot of fun, despite how angry I am at myself. And I truly mean that. I'm really angry with myself. Put that aside for now. So let's talk about the actual events themselves. Again, this is all from SWU Competitive Hub. They've been, and I've seen other places like in the KTOD Discord and other places, they are also trying to collate all the different events, all the different results. We do have what the decks were, to my knowledge, at this time, literally the day after. We don't have a deck list. I know Red Seal was going to provide both the deck list for top 8 as well as a general meta breakdown for what was showing up. The big thing for us, I will say, as we go, before we jump into everything, is that there was a ton of Boba. There was a ton of Sabine. And every time I looked around, there was, hey, there's more of them. I will say, however, also, and this is kind of what I expected, and we'll see when the numbers come out, so I'm just guesstimating here. I want to say out of the 100 people, because there was a population cap because it's just the size of the store, and the 100 people, I would say there's probably 30%, so 30 people, that were not playing recognized tier 1 competitive decks. And I'm not saying like a flavor of something like, oh, I personally was playing red Boba, like Space Boba. That is not like a tier 1 deck. I'm talking more really rogue fringe things, maybe beyond rogue into fringe. You know, there were Hera decks. There were Leia decks. There were, I ran up against a Fennec. Although that has been getting more momentum recently, but there was a lot of stuff floating around that if you asked someone on the competitive side to name 10 decks that they expected to see at the event, no one would have named these decks, I don't believe. Again, maybe 30 is high, but I kind of feel like there was around that level. As mentioned earlier, there was a big chunk of people that were high-level competitors, a ton of people that, you know, yeah, they have a good chance, or I expect them to be in the top 8, floating around the top 8 if, you know, they bubble out on breakers or something. So I worked through my second coffee, but I gotta hydrate up a little bit. I drank a lot of water yesterday, but you can never get enough in. Very long day of playing. I will absolutely say that. I think that definitely influenced people's deck decisions and what their game plans were coming in. This was also the very first weekend, so it's just people trying to make their first predictions. All future events will be reacting to, at the very least, this one and other subsequent ones. So with all that aside, and I'm sure I'll come back about other things that I forgot, let's take a look at the actual stuff, the breakdowns. Again, we don't have the list. This one from Spain is looking like what everyone is apoplectic about on Reddit right now. And I got to be honest, I've seen at least a half a dozen threads since yesterday, and there's probably more because I didn't like comb through because I don't care. And maybe this is as good a time as any to get into it. This top 8 was Boba, Sabine, Kira, Boba. And no, I'm not stuttering. That's a huge amount of Boba. 4th through 8th is Boba Green. The top 2 were Boba Yellow and Boba Green. And then, as mentioned, Sabine ECL, obviously. And then Kira Green. Now, it doesn't indicate whether it's Kira ECL or it's Kira 30. But either way, it's Kira. The big issue here, and again, okay, so before we dive into it, 120 players here. So a big event, a very large event. Got some pictures from the event down here. So shout out to them. You can definitely check the Melee link. I guess you could go through the individual players' matchups, kind of, if you can figure out who everybody else was. Because it's like, okay, well, I know that this is a Boba Yellow player, but I'm going to digress here. This is a live stream. I probably won't edit it for YouTube. I'll just throw it up there. This is all off the top of my head, although it's thoughts that I've had in the past. FFG royally screwed everything up for this. Going all the way back to when they announced, oh, we're going to partner with a known, like a big entity in, or however they phrased it, it was something along those lines, a known player in the tournament space, we'll call it. As soon as they said that, I knew it would be Melee, and I knew it would be terrible. Now, I knew it would be Melee because I had used Melee for my brief stint in Lurkana, and the site is atrocious. It is just abysmal. It's embarrassing. Full stop. Now, there are alternatives, dozens of them. I've used several personally, both as a player and an organizer for other games, and they are incredibly superior. Now, the reality of the situation is that there had to have been a lot of, like, there were dollars exchanged in order to get this agreement. However, I will also say that, and again, I don't have any inside information, obviously. I'm just guessing at this stuff. But I can only assume that they were intending to directly piggyback off of Lorcana's success and say, well, we're on the same platform too. And then it's like cross-visibility sort of thing. I'm sure that played into it. And these were the decisions. Because I want to believe, despite all of the missteps and screw-ups that FFG has been making since before the game launched, that they did some homework and they did at least try and look at some alternatives and then elected to say, hey, Lorcana's already on this. Let's just go with this. I don't want to believe that they got into a meeting 5 minutes before they quickly Googled biggest things and went, oh, Lorcana's using this. Let's do this one. I don't want to believe that's the case. Although it's almost plausible given other things with FFG. But the bottom line is I really can't stand Melee. Maybe it'll improve in the future. Maybe this will age terribly, but whatever. I don't care. Melee sucks. Why didn't they use Limitless? That's the bottom line. So yeah, it makes it difficult to figure this stuff out. But anyway, this is the big thing, and you'll see as we go through a lot of these others, you're going to see a lot of Boba. And also, again, shout out to this website because they pulled together a lot of the resources, including like where the streams were. So I thought that's really cool to give attention to that. I really appreciate it. Also, how do I get shown up on there? How do I get my channel on there, even though I didn't do coverage for this? But anyway, this one's going to be played today, probably getting played literally right. Actually, it's in California, so it'll probably start in another hour or so. I don't know, but we'll go back up to the top to the Spain one. As mentioned, the big thing people are losing their minds over, Chicken Littling over, in my opinion, is, oh my God, the meta's solved. And not only is the meta solved, it's catastrophically bad. Look, Boba is a powerful leader. Is Boba overpowered? I could probably, I think that's a defensible position, especially when you see other 4/7 leaders, you see other deploy 5 leaders, and you just have played card games and understand what resource generation in that capacity is. Look, I get it. I understand how people would look at Boba and everything else and go, why are these two things so wildly different? I get it. However, what I will caution people against is just overreacting to this, because if everybody recalls, way back in set 1, everyone was going ballistic that, oh my God, Boba Green is breaking the game. It is unbeatable. And then guess what? It dropped off the face of the earth for a while. Maybe not entirely, but it did disappear for a significant amount of time. And then at the tail end of set 1, Boba Yellow was coming up big, but there was still counter decks to it, and you had a relationship between them that was essentially rock, paper, scissors, a blue-green villain, and then Sabine and other stuff. And the way this game works is you absolutely can outplay your bad matchups. You can absolutely outplay other people, and I think to a larger degree than most other games that I played in the last 30 years. I firmly believe that. Now, Is it possible that Boba needs a ban? I refuse to entertain the idea of an errata. If you've seen what happened in Lorcana, and that actually came up in some conversations I was talking to my opponents and other people yesterday, and this has come up when I've talked to other people because I like talking to people from other games, get their input, get their thoughts on like, why do you, and it's not like, why are you playing that game? Why aren't you playing my game? It's, well, because I like talking about games, and it's, what do you enjoy about that game? And talking to people about the errata is one of the worst things you can do, because the worst thing that can happen to a new player is they show up, they walked into Walmart or whatever, they stumbled past a gaming store and they walk in and they go, that looks so cool. I love Star Wars. I love whatever. I've always wanted to try one of these games. And they buy a box and they go home and they build their first Boba deck. It's going to be terrible. It doesn't matter. They're new, but they're excited. And then they show up and the first thing that they're told is their cards don't work. That sucks, and those people will stop playing. Full stop. It's a huge barrier to this sort of thing, and it's come up as a problem in other games. There's a reason that you typically do not see errata anymore unless it's fixing a semicolon kind of thing, like minor things this is obviously what was intended, and 90% of people understand it that way, but we're going to tweak the wording so that it fits the templating or something like that. You don't have functional erratas where now this card is now that card. That almost never happens anymore. And there's a reason for that. I feel like this is pretty axiomatic, but I keep seeing people throw around errata. It's a bad idea. Do not do that. Ban the card. Full stop, ban the card. I could go on a long tirade about this. If people really want to hear about it, I can do a video on it. I've done plenty before, but the only way an errata would work is if they won't do this, as evidenced by the debacle that was not printing the appropriate amount of participation promos for these events. The only way it would work is if they reissued a new version of the card with the new text and sent out like thousands of copies to every store that does organized play. And in the next set, give it out as like a box topper promo. Give it new art, reprint the card, new text. That's the only way this would work, because then you would hopefully overwhelm the amount of old ones with the new ones. But clearly, since this is a set one card and they're gearing up or have already geared up for that set one reprint that we keep hearing about at the end of the year, my guess is that ain't going to happen. So in lieu of that, if there is a problem, just ban the card or cards or whatever. It's cleaner. It's way easier to explain to someone and say, look, that card is so powerful, you can't actually use it. And they go, okay, and they put it away. But when you have to explain to somebody your card doesn't do that and you have to memorize all the stuff, then you got to check all these other resources, and then you got to do this, and you're going to have to do that before every time you come. Nah, nobody likes that. No one likes that. It sounds crazy, but being told you literally can't use that is cleaner and easier for players. This is from experience. Running events and playing in events. This is just the way it works. It's a quirk of humans. I don't know. But anyway, people are losing their minds because, oh my God, Boba and Sabine are dominating. Yeah, that's how card games work. Like I've said this before, and people love to say, oh, well, Star Wars has such a diverse meta. Look. First of all, there's no problem with having only like 3 tier 1 decks. Assuming that's true, which I'm not sure that's true, we need more information than this. And I'll explain why in a second, because people were losing their minds when they were countered with that already. We need more information than this simply because this is a single weekend. It is the first weekend, the first set of events. These are all independent events, and most people are going to gravitate towards what they know. I think a lot of people, myself included, were expecting a ton of Sabine. What does well into Sabine? Well, Boba has one of the better matchups compared to the field. Personally, I don't think that it's still spectacular. Like, not the level that I would want, personally. But it certainly does better than, like, Palpatine. So guess what? If you're expecting a bunch of Sabine, you're not going to see a bunch of Palpatines roll up to the event. We had a few at the New Jersey PQ, and guess what? They got flattened. Shocker. So I am not surprised by these results. I don't think anybody is. Whether you're arguing about like the lunacy that is, oh my God, the sky is falling, or even if you think it's reasonable, the fact of the matter is, I don't think anybody's surprised that Boba is performing well. But we've seen plenty of these events happen where, hey, yeah, Boba's at the top. It's one of the best decks. It is one of the best cards. Okay, that's fine. There's going to be a best deck. There's going to be best cards. And because the game is so skill intensive, these players who are playing powerful cards are going to beat most other people, probably independently of the matchups, and that's good. That's a good thing. Additionally, it is very good to have a defined meta. Now, personally, I'm fine if there is a tier 0 meta. And I'm not saying that that is generally good or that everybody should like that. Or that's not the argument I'm making. I personally don't care. If Boba Fett was literally the only playable deck, I would not care. As a player, I would care from a game health perspective. But that's a different argument. The reason that it is good to have these defined and tight metas is that it is a deck builder's dream. Because you know exactly what everyone's going to show up with within like a card or two. And that means that whether you're playing the same deck with super secret tech or you're playing some off-the-wall rogue thing that happens to dominate them, you are going to whoop up on people. Because even if they are a very skilled player, if they're encountering something for the very first time, they are way more likely to make mistakes. Again, axiomatic. So people who love deck building, people who love brewing, love this sort of result because guess what? The next week when they show up, they're going to be prepared for this. I'm not saying that this is great, this is wonderful, but I think people need to relax that it's like, okay, there's one event. We don't know how many were there. We don't know the nature of the matchups or anything. It happens to be one event. Is it a concern? Yes. Should we continue monitoring? Yes. Is there another set on the horizon? Yes. Everybody chill. I'll probably come back and rant and rave about that. But this one, there's, I mean, all right, look, like I said, a lot of Boba. Next up, we got in Dallas, we got another Boba, Sabine, Kira, Han 2 blue, Han 1 yellow, Sabine, Boba, Sabine. So we have, combined with Boba and Sabine, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 8. With 3 other archetypes represented. And you could split Boba easily, split Boba green and yellow into different archetypes. Yes, they both use Boba, but they play dramatically differently. And then the same with Sabine ECL and Sabine yellow. What's crazy to me in these conversations about, oh, well, Boba is dominating and we got to ban it, or Sabine is too much of a problem, or the combination thereof. Like I saw somebody complain. I'm sorry, I'm on a one of those days. I'm going to be tirading. Somebody said, oh, well, those 2 decks account for 30% of the meta. And I'm like, so 70% of the meta is other stuff. Because that sounds perfectly fine to me. Like that sounds perfectly acceptable within range. To be honest, having a massively open, and this is going to be another digression, having let's assume that there are 10 unique decks, like actual unique strategies, 10 different decks. That is actually very bad. That is very bad. You know why? Because your entire day will be decided and almost exclusively by the matchmaker. Now, as I said earlier, you can certainly outplay bad matchups. And maybe you even know what the other 9 decks are. But the reality is that you are going to have good or bad matchups, and you have to assume that the person sitting across from you is also a good player. If they're a good player and this is a bad matchup, you should lose. Emphasis on should. It's not necessarily going to happen. It's a card game. People make mistakes. I know I did a lot yesterday. But that is actually, to me, more unhealthy to the degree of having like a single deck and having 10 decks. Those are both equally bad, in my opinion, because you can't reasonably prepare. And then it's, hey, 2 weeks ago, I decided I'm playing this deck, and I picked this sideboard, and then I sat down in my first 3 rounds, or in first 2, if you go 0-2 drop, whatever. Your first X number of rounds, just happen to be against things that you don't line up well against. That sucks, especially if you traveled for the event. That's a terrible feeling. So bottom line is that you can get to either extreme and it is not good. We're not talking about locals here. We're talking about high-level competitive events where people are playing there for the competitive purpose. Yeah, your locals might be highly competitive, whatever. But there's a big difference between how locals function and how higher competitive level events function. Again, digressing and tirading here. This top 8 seems fine. Like, okay, Boba Green won. The next Boba deck was at 7th. We don't have what the quarterfinals were. We could probably figure it out, but I'm not going to. But the semis were Sabine versus Sabine, and then Boba versus Han. And then Boba versus Sabine. Well, if we assume that Boba happens to line up well against Sabine, like, once you get to top 8, all bets are off because, and this is why one of my former teammates used to always say, you can't complain about any event you top 8, because once you're into top 8, again, it's starting a new mini tournament. And the reality is, the bottom line is, all of the people that you're playing against clearly earned their way to be there. So they know the matchups. This is what I was saying earlier. If it's a bad matchup for you, that sucks. You're lining up into a bad matchup, and now you absolutely know that those people know what they're doing, as compared to, oh, it's a bad matchup in round 1, but that person picked up the deck 20 minutes before the start time. There's a big difference between those two realities. So if these decks happen to line up in like the way the bracket played out in a certain way, that sucks. But it's pretty, I don't think anybody's surprised by this. I will call out the Han one, which we'll get to when we get to the New Jersey one again. This seems like it might be a good call for next week. We'll talk about that in a minute. Speaking of the New Jersey one, this says 99 players. I know we had 50 tables, and I'm pretty sure there were people at all of them. So I don't know if that's a typo or maybe somebody like no-showed and there was a buy. I'm not sure. But again, shout out to Red Seal. Shout out to McClunky, which, by the way, you can see the streams here. I was able to, because I left a little early. I didn't play the last round because, again, I scrubbed. I got to catch a little bit. Shout out to Chrono and Tower Number 9 for casting. I know there was somebody else on there, but I don't remember who it was. I really enjoyed their commentary. Well done. And again, shout out to everybody that was there. It was really cool meeting Woo and the KTOD guys. Shout out to Mike. I don't know. Again, I'm not forgetting. I'm forgetting people. It is not intended as a slight. If I didn't name you, just let me know in the comments, and my bad. This had a lot of Boba. This had a lot of Boba as well, as you can see. Couple Sabines, Kira, and then Han. So I did get cooked by Mono Han. Ian, who had won the Baltimore events, the SCG ones way back, and then also performed well at Gen Con. One of the people who performed well at Gen Con with Han 1 cooked me in round 1. I sat down against him and I'm like, this is not going to go well in my head. And then afterwards, when it didn't go well, I said as much. So shout out to him. I think it was his teammate who is this Han 1. I asked him after the event or after our game, like, so what pushed you? Like, why are you still playing this? And he's like, or I asked him more specifically, why this over Boba Yellow? And he said the control matchup. And as soon as he said that, bang, light bulbs went off. And I'm like, damn, you're right. Because the control matchups, which we might as well talk about now, were a big struggle. You can absolutely win against blue stuff with Boba Yellow, but it is way more of a struggle than it is for other matchups. And this corrects a lot of it between the Bozo combo, as they put it, the whole DJ thing, or the additional disruption, because powering out, and he did it to me, powering out Bodhi on 1 is a real kick in the dick. Like, you just get knocked down flat, and then you can follow it up with additional disruption in the form of Spark of Rebellion or even Cunning discards or whatever. Like, you can really hammer it home and then back it up with the Bozo combo. So there's a lot of ways to punish blue decks. And the reason that I was saying that it might be a good call for next week is a lot of those blue decks, whether it's Kira's, it's Bosk Blue, it's other villain ones, or just generally the later game control decks. And we saw an Iden Blue, which, spoiler alert, do well. They tend to beat up on Boba. That's what we saw in set 1 as well. Like, that's why those Vader decks came in and dropped the hammer on Boba Green. And then that's why Boba Green disappeared for a while. I would expect a correction, a reaction to this week's overwhelming presence of Boba Fett with a lot of blue stuff. So, spoiler alert, the Sabines are probably going to feast. Is Boba going to disappear entirely? Of course not. The deck is too powerful, and if people are trying to learn, like if you have a player who's played Boba since set 2 came out versus a player who picked up one of these blue control decks today, trying to figure it out by next weekend, I think I'm going to side with the Boba player. But there's a number of players who are very good at playing control, and I wouldn't be surprised if they perform well going forward. Now, ultimately, we did see in the semifinals, excuse me, it's right here, Wu piloting Kira lose to Boba, which it's a great matchup for Kira. You can see it on the stream. I'm not going to spoil what happened. Obviously, the spoiler is here as to what happened, but not the way it happened, which is very important. And Wu is a much better player than I am. So this is not a knock against him in any way, shape, or form. But it was a long day. And as I said earlier, some of these control decks, even if they perform well next weekend or have good matchups, it's a very long day, a very stressful day, and you can absolutely be fried at the end. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some level of that, even though we personally got a lunch break. I don't know if other events were doing that. Although I'm a diabetic and I do appreciate that, I kind of wish there wasn't, just so we can power through the event a little bit faster. But it is what it is. So, again, a lot of Boba, not surprised. It is what it is. Next up, we have in Kansas City, Boba. The Boba in Charkentown, this is what I played. I assume this is a very similar space version. Hantu ECL, notably, not Hantu Blue, and Sabine. Boba ends up taking down Hantu Blue in the final. Boba Green specifically. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bobas, 3 different archetypes, and a variation on the green one. So calling back to my earlier point, if there was literally a single deck, like it was only Boba 30, that was the viable deck. To me, competitively, if the mirror is interesting and there are interesting decisions to be made and skill differentiation to be had, I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. I play a lot of different kinds of games. Like if you play a shooter, guess what? Like the loadouts that you start with are generally the same, and you could pick up the same power-ups or something. But guess what? There are certain players who continually perform better because they're better at the game. The same thing can happen here. Now, you could get very dumb mirrors also, where it's just very coin flippy, or it's super boring, even if there is a skill differentiator. And again, I'm not saying that this is correct. This is my opinion, and I understand the ramifications on the larger game. But as Magic the Gathering has shown us, competitive play is not the primary driver for any game, and it never will be. And anyone who thinks otherwise not only is wrong, but needs to learn. Casual players will drive games and support games and continue to cause them to be created and sustained. The only question is, how much does this impact casual player buying habits? And I would venture to guess that the issues with the distribution and the power level of the sets, like the interesting cards in the set, have way more of an impact than what tournament results, even something as big as the planetary qualifiers, do on casual opinions. Maybe that's not true for this game. I've seen a lot of games. I've seen different things happen. And generally speaking, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So either way, we get another bunch of Boba, but these are different archetypes. They do play very differently, present very different threats. And I think people are looking at the leaders and going, oh my God, it's another Boba Fett deck. But they're not the same. And also, to all the people crying about it, Boba Fett is a very popular character. This isn't like random no-name character, and it's like, well, how come Luke isn't popular, or how come Darth Vader isn't good? Okay, well, Boba Fett is a recognizable Star Wars character to like anyone who's heard of Star Wars. So I'm not as concerned about it. To be honest, like I think Sabine is comparatively like a no-name to people that aren't as into Star Wars. So if Sabine were dominating to this level, I think that argument would hold more water. But it's not a very strong argument to begin with. Next up, we got the Colorado event. We didn't check the numbers. This was 117. Obviously, we talked about the 100 here. The Dallas one had 107. This one had 120. Here's where we hit our other complaint that people were kind of chicken littling about, and that is the number of players. We'll talk about the top 8 here first. So we got Hantu Blue, Iden Blue, Hantu Blue, Ray Tarkentown, Sabine, Hantu, Kira. Notably, literally 0 Bobas. Now, the final was Kira Green versus Iden Blue. Iden Blue takes it. I'm not surprised. It's the dirtlier, more controlling deck. Probably should be favored just on paper. We actually have the Iden list, so I got a few people in my Discord, link in the description, by the way, that will want this list. I got to remember to share this to them because I don't think this was here yesterday. So, this event only had 46 players. There was another event that also was like sub 50. And people are very concerned that this is heralding the end of competitive play or something like that for Star Wars Unlimited. Maybe not to that extreme, but they are very concerned. And I get it. You look at that number and then you look at the Spain one. It's like, but I think that immediately assuages some of the concern. Not entirely, but clearly you can't say that the game is dying if in this area it's doing poorly, but in that area it's doing fantastic. That sounds more like a regional problem. And given that FFG sucks when it comes to organized play, basically anything except for the game itself, because I think FFG did a fantastic job and I can't praise them enough for the gameplay. Anything aside from the gameplay has been a catastrophe on one level or another, and organized play is no different. And because FFG has a history of this, and they're also not a like internet meme, they're not a small indie company. It's not really the meme. The meme would be saying they are a small indie company and they could have never seen any of these things coming. But the reality is they aren't. This isn't their first game. I don't think it's even their first Star Wars game. It's certainly not their first card game or set of organized play or large tournaments. And this, I can't lay 100% of the blame at the FFG's feet, but I'm going to say like 99.9%. In my opinion, it is almost always on the first party to make this stuff happen, make it successful, make it large, and support the stores. You want the store. The stores are FFG's customers. They're the ones who buy the most product, but the stores need to sell stuff to the players. So that's where tournaments come in. It gives you an excuse to use the cards if you're not just 100% kitchen table, blah, blah, blah. Everybody kind of understands how the chain works there. So you need to support your customers, FFG, support the stores, and help them set this up. FFG has a larger reach than any given store. The store may know their players best, for sure, but for a large event like this that is trying to pull people in regionally, especially in the failure that is Season 0, there's a lot of people from outside regions, neighboring regions, whether it's states or like if you're up north and it's close to the border for countries like Canada versus northern US, that sort of thing. And I'm sure the same for Europe. Help them out. Help the stores. They started to correct stuff, but it never should have had to be corrected. How did you botch this in the first place? So, is this problem, this 46-person event, 100% on FFG? I'm sure that is not true. I am going to say it is FFG's fault until I provided proof otherwise. Not proven wrong, because I'm willing to change my mind if someone can show me, hey, this store screwed something up. This store did something wrong or incorrect or whatever. But the bottom line is this event should have been larger, should have had more people. And I don't think it's on, like I was talking with a number of people who said, oh, well, they should have they make you pay up front and there's no refunds. Okay. But what happens if they just don't show anyway? Like, yes, there's an incentive there, but if I had like a death in the family, I'm not showing up to this thing. And it doesn't matter. So now you're just pissing me off and make me not want to attend future ones. And I'm not trying to like insult the person with that idea, but I personally think they needed to have like the wait list program scared people away. Because if I was in this area and I didn't first get into it, like I tried to sign up, it sold out in minutes. Okay. I get put on the wait list. I'm assuming that I'm not going to go unless I get an email like a week in advance. The reality is I have real life responsibilities. And if my wife says, hey, do you have a tournament this week? And I say, no, I'm on the wait list. And she's like, well, why don't we make plans to do XYZ? Okay. I'm going to go with that. And I'm not going to cancel on my wife on Friday because I got an email at 11:30 at night saying, hey, you can sign up tomorrow. The biggest issue for me is I think they needed to be uncapped and they needed to be able to support, like, realistically, they can never be uncapped entirely. There's going to be a maximum limit. But you need to give people an incentive to come down there, because even if I thought there would be room, I'm not going to, there's an upper limit to how far you're willing to drive or hypothetically fly, which is crazy for what we're being offered, which is a whole nother disaster. There's a point where it's not worth it. Even if you love the game, and I do, even if you really want to play, and I did, at some point you go, it is not worth it for me to pay this amount of money, spend this amount of time to go down there for the chance to be able to play. And I don't know the specifics for this event, but it does suck that there were only 46. Do we discount this top 8? Of course not. People care, like they'll scream from the rooftops about how they won their showdown and there was like 6 people there. So 46 players, and you know damn well a good number of them were strong players. You can't discount these results out of hand. It does suck that there's only 46, but that's life. Next up, we have another 46 person event. As you can see, I was highlighting Bosk here because, yeah, I love Bosk ECL. I wanted to play it for my PQ. I'm kind of glad I didn't. We don't have all the results for this. We know Han won green. Was number 1 at the end of Swiss. Boba yellow. 2 unknowns, Bosk ECL, Ray Blue, Gar, and Sabine ECL. Notably, we got 1 Boba. We got 1 Sabine. Even if you assume the other 2 are Boba, yes, again, that's half the top 8 is between those 2 decks. But then we also have 1, 2, 3, 4 other decks. I'm a little surprised that Han 130 took it, but I mean, I haven't watched the video yet. I will say, shout out to the Bosk player, who you have to see it to believe it. But if you watch the VOD, their entire deck was in top loaders. I want to know what they carried it in. I remember seeing Battle of Wits decks, which if you don't know what that card is, it was a magic card that said at the start of your turn, basically, if you had 200 or more cards in your deck, you won the game. And it was a legit deck for a period of time in competitive play. It was like tier 2, but like you could reasonably play it. And I saw somebody bring a 200 card box that their deck was in, and they'd have to stand it up. And like the shuffling was a disaster, which I imagine this was as well. I'd love to know what they carried it in, because top loaders just make it. I didn't notice it at first. And I'm like, wait, why is that deck? Oh my God. That's why it's so big, because it's in top loaders. I can't let this one go. The next one is Odyssey Games. This is in California. We still don't know because it's going to be going on. Overall, I am not at all surprised by these results. It is kind of what I predicted. At least Again, we don't know the full meta scope for some of these events. I'm going to find where, here it is, where the New Jersey one is. I saw a ton of Sabine. We'll see what the breakdown is. But there was a lot of other stuff. So like, look, I saw a Hera deck. I saw Gar Saxon decks. I saw Leia decks. I saw Bo-Katan decks. I saw a ton of stuff. Did they all perform well? I didn't say that. and again, I'm not trying to insult anybody who's running those lists, but you have to walk into the event and recognize that you are immediately putting yourself at a disadvantage. There's a reason that certain decks are meta decks, and they are known quantities, and they are powerful. They're using the best cards. They're using the best leaders. And you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you walk into the room without one of those decks. So you better be damn sure that you know what you're doing if you're not going to show up with one of them. And that's before you get into the whole preparation part of it. Do I expect that this is going to continue going forward? I mean, we are absolutely going to see more Bobas and Sabines and Hans and like all the tier 1 stuff. Those aren't going away. But I think there will be a cyclical nature of the decks throughout each of these events as we go forward, and we end up seeing how this plays out. And then ultimately we'll get set 3, and then things will get shaken up then. I don't see this as inherently problematic right now. Could it be in the future? Yes. Is it likely to be? I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you for sure. I don't think, like if you pin me down and said you have to make a choice, I would say no. We're going to see a rotation of things where we will see stuff displace Boba. Maybe it continues to keep on winning. But again, as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, let's say Boba, a Boba variant, whether it's green, it's yellow, it's red, it's ECL, it's 30, it's this, it's that. I mean, there was a Boba blue that showed up also, by the way, in that red seal. A Boba deck wins literally every PQ from here on out. I still do not believe that's problematic, because I will want to know what the other 15 decks in the top 16 are. Because at the end of the day, the person at 9th bubbled out. If one of their opponents won one more game in an unrelated match, it's possible that they would have been in the top 8, possibly able to take down the ultimate winner, as compared to whoever was in 8th or 7th or whatever. These are large events with a lot of strong players playing a lot of good decks. And there are going to be things that are decided by tiebreakers. It could be like your opponent's win percentage and your opponent drew with somebody and got a double loss. There are things that could play in that are going to end up causing you to bubble out at the end of the day that don't really show the full scope. You don't really understand what's going on until you see all of these details. Don't get me wrong. Again, shout out to SWU Competitive Hub and all the other places that are trying to pull all this information together. But I don't think you can just look at, oh, well, this is the top 8 and this is the defining thing. This is the only thing to look at, and it's only this weekend that matters. Like that sounds insane on its surface, and it is insane. There's more information to take in. There's more things to consider. So, bottom line is, are there things to be concerned about? Yes. Is it the end of the world? No. And I think there's still a lot more to see going forward. And ultimately, things are going to change in another month and whatever anyway. I'm personally fine if Boba continues to be a tier 1 deck from now until the game stops. I know not everybody feels that way, but I'm perfectly fine with that. If Boba gets banned, because please, for the love of Christ, I'm pleading with you, do not errata things. Do not. But let's say that Boba gets banned. I'm also fine with that. Let it go. I don't care. But I do care that people are, and this is an internet thing, people are jumping to conclusions to the degree that they are. That's going to happen no matter what. There's always going to be somebody who gets very upset very quickly, justified or not. But it has been an interesting set of events. I want to say that I learned a lot from my experience. I don't think that I did to a degree. So it confirmed a lot of priors. And, well, I guess it's just confirmed a lot of priors. Like, I knew I was going to make the errors that I did. I could kind of, it was almost an out-of-body experience, like watching myself make the idiot mistake. Like, a mistake that I've actively avoided in the past. And I've caught myself because I was like, oh, well, I'm going to make this play. And then I go, no, that's bad because of XYZ. Do this other thing. And then you win the game. But I took the first path yesterday and I got what I deserved. I think that's one of the bigger takeaways that people have to understand is that, and I want to do a video about this, like what's the best way to improve at Star Wars Unlimited? And this is going to sound crazy, but like just play more games. The number one thing is play more games. This number two thing is play more meaningful games. Because once you play a certain number, it's like, okay, now you need to like, and you should always be doing this, but there are a lot of people out there who just simply do not play enough games. To paraphrase Azul from Pokemon, he's a Pokemon content creator and high-level competitor. I'm paraphrasing him, like I said, but he said something to the effect of like, there are people in Pokemon that don't play enough games to complain or to be justified in complaining about how they perform. And I think that's true for this game, where you don't play enough games to really complain that, oh, well, I did bad because of all these other reasons. No, you did bad because you played worse than your opponents. And that's what I did. I played worse than my opponents. There was one match where I think I was screwed no matter what, because it was a bad matchup. It was a great player. And I don't think, like, and this is, I only think this because I also did not test enough games against it. So it's possible that if I know more, it's actually a good matchup and I'm playing poorly. But I think that I was going to lose that one. The other losses were due to my own errors, and that's on me, which is good because I can fix them. It's bad because it's going to haunt me. It is what it is. But I've been rambling a lot longer than I thought I was going to. I'm going to close it up. I'll probably rip this and put it up on YouTube, just as a quick thing. But yeah, that's going to do it for now. If anybody has any comments or thoughts about the events, hopefully, I mean, by the time this goes up, we'll hopefully have all the deck lists and stuff. If you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Like, but try and convince me. Don't just comment and be like, you're an idiot. I'm sure a bunch of people will do that just because I said that. Because I may be an idiot, but like, explain why. Like, defend your position. Don't just say, oh, well, Boba needs to be banned because it's clearly too powerful. Like, okay, it did very well this weekend, but if it changes next weekend, are you still going to say that? Like, if next weekend Kira dominates everything because Kira is supposed to be a good matchup against Boba, or some other deck, whatever, Bosk Blue, whatever, it doesn't matter. If some other deck puts Boba in its place, does it still need to be banned? Does it still need to be eroded? Please don't do that. You know, whatever the case may be. Tell me. I'm willing to listen. Just explain it. But that's going to do it for this time. So as always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time for more Randoms Thoughts.